There is no peace now in a man who bows to madness, no honor in the one who calls poison his wine, drinks it slowly, and whispers the word love as it kills him. The modern man isn't destroyed by war, famine, or fire. He's destroyed by a smile, a kiss, a soft voice that wraps around his spine like a snake and teaches him to enjoy the constriction. And no one weeps for him because he agreed to die quietly. I remember a man sharp, capable, with immense potential. He was building a successful career, had loyal friends, a clear vision for his future. But then a relationship entered his life. Slowly, subtly, he began to bend, to accommodate, to tolerate. A dismissive comment here, a public put-down there. Her erratic moods became his daily weather report. He started dimming his own light, abandoning his principles, all in the name of keeping the peace or making her happy. Bit by bit, his confidence eroded, his purpose blurred. He wasn't just losing her, he was losing himself. What would Marcus Aurelius, that unwavering Roman emperor, say to this? He never begged, he ruled. He didn't chase storms to feel alive, he mastered them. He left behind warnings, not poems, not comfort. Warnings like, you have power over your mind, not outside events. But today's man has surrendered both. He lets a woman become the storm, the event, the god of his every emotional state. And worse, he thinks this is romance. He calls it love, but it's a slow, deliberate form of self-destruction. This is the brutal truth of what happens when a man tolerates the intolerable. So listen now, and listen like your future depends on it. Because it does. There are 10 behaviors no man should ever tolerate from a woman. Not because you're afraid of being alone, not because you're afraid of losing her, but because you fundamentally refuse to lose yourself. If you let these behaviors go unchecked, you are not a man in love. You are a man in chains, slowly, quietly sacrificing your very soul. Each of these behaviors is a silent wound, a hidden erosion, slowly but surely paving the way for the death of your purpose, your peace, and your masculine core. We're going to break them down one by one. This isn't just a list, it's a mirror. The first behavior, a silent killer of a man's spirit, is a mockery. This isn't just playful teasing. This is the rolling of the eyes when you express an idea. The sarcastic, cutting remarks made in front of friends, later dismissed with a dismissive wave and a, "Oh, I was just joking." It's the public embarrassment she'll later pretend meant nothing. But what it does subtly, insidiously, is to erode your self-respect and confidence. Peace by agonizing peace. It teaches you to second-guess yourself, to shrink your presence, to hold back your thoughts because you anticipate the sneer, the dismissive laugh. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, wisely stated, "What injures the hive injures the bee." And if we extend that wisdom, what injures your image, your perceived value, your very essence, ultimately injures your soul. A man who allows his woman to publicly humiliate him, to chip away at his dignity with veiled insults, isn't building a relationship. He's digging a grave for his confidence, one sarcastic cut at a time. He's teaching the world and himself that his worth is negotiable. I've witnessed this firsthand. I had a client, a really capable guy, who would visibly deflate every time his girlfriend made a joke at his expense in a group setting. It was always framed as lighthearted, but the barb was sharp, and the laughter that followed was rarely with him. You could see the light dim in his eyes, the way he'd subtly withdraw his shoulders, hunching just a little. He tolerated it because he didn't want to make a scene, he didn't want to be sensitive. But the damage wasn't just superficial. It went deep, corroding his belief in himself, convincing him that he was indeed worthy of being mocked. The relationship became a constant test of how much disrespect he could absorb before he finally broke. And that, my friends, is no way to live. The second behavior to never tolerate: chaos normalized. This is the woman who is never truly at peace. Her moods rule the entire household. One minute she's warm, inviting, playful. The next, she's ice-distant or exploding in anger. Her emotional state is a blade, and you, my friend, are always bleeding. Yet you've somehow convinced yourself this constant turmoil, this unpredictable storm, is passion. It isn't. It's pathology. It's a fundamental lack of self-regulation that she has externalized, making you bear the burden. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. But the man who shares his bed, his home, his life with a hurricane will never find that retreat. He'll only run from her, run from himself, run from the quiet life he once dreamed of. He becomes a prisoner to her emotional volatility, constantly walking on eggshells, constantly anticipating the next shift in the weather." I've seen environments like this where you could literally feel the tension in the air the moment a certain person walked into the room. Everyone around them, partners, family members, friends, would subtly adjust their behavior, their tone, their very posture to accommodate the dominant emotional current. It was like living in a constant state of low-grade anxiety where one person's unpredictable moods dictated the atmosphere for everyone. You'd find yourself tiptoeing, choosing your words carefully just to avoid triggering a fresh storm. And the scary part is many people in these situations genuinely believe this chaotic dance is a sign of intense connection or deep love. But it's not. It's an emotional prison slowly draining the life and peace from everyone trapped within its walls. The third behavior no man should tolerate: attention addiction. This is the woman who cannot survive without constant male validation. The one whose phone is an extension of her ego, constantly seeking external affirmation. She measures her worth by likes, by comments, by the sheer volume of messages she receives. She might tell you it's empowerment, a display of her independence. But if her value truly comes from the eyes of strangers, if her self-worth is dictated by a fleeting digital audience, she will never ever genuinely value the man who sees her soul. She will always be looking past you to the next notification, the next potential validation. Marcus Aurelius warned of chasing illusions. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." And the man who lives with a woman who worships the crowd, who constantly needs to be seen and adored by the masses, never truly begins his own life. He becomes a shadow beside a spotlight she reserves entirely for herself. His existence becomes background noise to her constant performance for the world. I've seen relationships become utterly consumed by this. I remember a couple where one partner was constantly glued to their phone, posting, scrolling, refreshing. Every interaction in the real world seemed secondary to the digital affirmation. It became clear that their mood, their happiness, even their sense of self-worth hinged entirely on the perceived approval of an unseen audience. The other partner, initially understanding and supportive, slowly started to feel invisible, unheard, and irrelevant. The relationship became a stage for one and a lonely backstage for the other. It wasn't about connecting with the person beside them. It was about the endless, insatiable hunger for external attention. And that hunger, left unchecked, will devour any genuine connection. The fourth behavior no man should ever tolerate: sexual manipulation. This is when she withholds intimacy to punish you or grants it to reward you. She uses sex not as an expression of love or genuine connection, but as leverage. And you, craving warmth, craving that connection, crawl like a beggar to her throne, desperate for moments of pleasure. This isn't a healthy dynamic, it's a power play. Marcus Aurelius taught self-mastery and detachment, the triumph of reason over impulse. But the man ruled by his lust, by his desperate need for physical intimacy, is not a man. He is a slave paying indignity for fleeting moments of pleasure. The sex itself isn't the problem. Her control of it is, and your obedience to that control is the real disease slowly eroding your autonomy and self-respect. I've heard countless stories, some directly from men I've worked with, where intimacy became a bartering chip. A partner would become cold and distant after a disagreement, only to thaw when a man conceded a point or bought an expensive gift or apologized for something that wasn't his fault. The underlying message was clear: you get this if you do that. The warmth, the connection became conditional, a tool in her arsenal to exert control. This isn't love. It's a transactional arrangement where a man's desire is weaponized against him, forcing him to compromise his dignity for physical affection. It's a subtle but profoundly damaging form of psychological warfare that leaves a man feeling used and depleted. The fifth behavior no man should tolerate: contempt for your purpose. This is when she laughs at your goals, rolls her eyes at your discipline, or actively interrupts your focus. Why? Because she sees no intrinsic value in your future unless it directly benefits her. This isn't partnership. This is sabotage. She's not rooting for your growth. She's subtly undermining it, making you feel foolish for having ambitions beyond her immediate orbit. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. But you cannot be one if every step forward you take, every disciplined effort you make is mocked or dismissed by the one who walks beside you. The man who stays with a woman who scorns his mission will one day awaken in a life meticulously built for her and completely empty of himself. His dreams will wither, replaced by hers, and he'll become a mere facilitator of her desires, losing his own sense of meaning and direction." I've seen this countless times. A driven man with a passion project, say writing a book or starting a side business. He'd talk about it with excitement, the discipline it required. But his partner would dismiss it with, "Oh, that old thing again," or, "Don't you think you're spending too much time on that when you could be with me?" The subtle eye rolls, the sighs when he wanted to work on his craft. It wasn't overt sabotage, but a consistent, quiet erosion of his self-belief. Eventually, he'd put his passion aside, telling himself it wasn't that important or that he was being selfish. He built a life that satisfied her, but it was hollow for him. He became a stranger to his own purpose, all because he tolerated the steady drip of her contempt. So that's 5 down, 5 more to go. And if even one of these sounds familiar, then understand this isn't just a list. It's a mirror. You are bleeding slowly, silently. And what you're doing, it is not noble. It is not romantic. It is not sacrifice. It is self-destruction wearing perfume. Marcus Aurelius was not gentle, and neither is truth. It can be harsh, uncomfortable, even painful to look at. But the alternative is far worse. It's living a lie day in and day out, watching yourself disappear. It's time to face what's real, no matter how much it stings. Let's finish what we started. Let's continue this brutal truth. The sixth behavior no man should tolerate: the ghost of competition. She doesn't want to walk beside you. She wants to outshine you. Her words drip with comparison. Her victories must be louder than yours. Her success, her income, her followers, her status. They are not shared achievements. They are weapons to be wielded. And slowly, agonizingly, you, the man who should be the center of your own life, become a silhouette in your own home. Your achievements are downplayed, your efforts minimized, all to ensure her spotlight shines brightest. Marcus Aurelius, ever wise, warned, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do." And yet here she is, tying her value, her perceived happiness, to outperforming the very man who should be her protector, her partner, not her opponent. You're not her man. You are her ace mirror-e. And she will only love you when you reflect her superiority. It's a relationship where success is a zero-sum game, and you're always on the losing side. I've observed this dynamic play out with truly disheartening results. I knew a couple where the man, a talented artist, began to see his creative endeavors met with subtle dismissal if they threatened to gain more recognition than his partner's career. Her seemingly supportive questions always seemed to lead back to a comparison, a veiled critique. If he landed a big project, her immediate response wouldn't be pure joy, but a remark about how her recent achievement was somehow bigger or more significant. It poisoned the well of their shared life. He started holding back his enthusiasm, his ambition subconsciously shrinking himself to avoid triggering her competitive instinct. The home, which should have been a sanctuary of mutual support, became a quiet arena where one person constantly vied for the top spot, leaving the other feeling stifled and diminished. The seventh behavior no man should tolerate: emotional manipulation disguised as trauma. This is where every mistake she makes is excused by her past. Every act of coldness, every cruel word, every betrayal is explained away by something she claims to be healing from. You are no longer a partner. You are her therapist, her punching bag, her confessional. She sins, and you repent. And the more broken she claims to be, the more guilty you feel for simply needing love, respect, or boundaries from her. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But this isn't revenge. This is corruption. She isn't truly healing. She's hijacking your empathy. She's weaponizing her past wounds to control your present actions. And if you confuse your role as a man with that of a redeemer, you will be crucified by a woman who never intended to change. You will exhaust yourself trying to save someone who is actively using their past to justify their current destructive behavior, leaving you emotionally depleted and resentful. I've seen this dynamic repeatedly, where a partner's past trauma becomes a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card for all their unacceptable actions. Any attempt to hold them accountable, to set a boundary, or to express your hurt is met with a swift deflection. "You just don't understand what I've been through," or "my past makes me this way." I knew a man who spent years walking on eggshells, constantly apologizing for his own needs, because his partner's every outburst was attributed to a difficult childhood. He became her perpetual caretaker, absorbing all her negativity, while her behavior never improved. He believed he was being loving and understanding, but in reality he was enabling a cycle of emotional abuse, sacrificing his own well-being on the altar of her unresolved past. It's a tragic trap where empathy is exploited and genuine growth is stifled. The eighth behavior no man should tolerate: entitlement without accountability. She expects more from you than she ever gives. She demands royalty but behaves with peasantry, yet still insists she's the ultimate prize. Her gratitude is extinct, replaced by an endless stream of criticism. You build, she evaluates. You sacrifice, she demands. You lead and she resists, not because you lead poorly, but because submission to strength feels like a loss to the ego that raised her. Marcus Aurelius would have seen this clearly. He said, "So other people hurt me. That's their problem. Their character and actions are not mine." But the man who lets a woman's ingratitude define his worth is no longer living by Stoic wisdom. He is drowning in someone else's self-importance, allowing their lack of accountability to dictate his peace of mind. He constantly strives to meet an ever-moving target of demands, only to be met with further criticism, leaving him exhausted and unappreciated. I've witnessed this dynamic where one person was constantly pouring into the relationship, effort, resources, emotional support, while the other simply consumed, offering little in return. Any attempt to discuss this imbalance was met with defensiveness or a flip of the script that made the giving partner feel guilty for even bringing it up. It's a draining, one-sided affair where the giver is perpetually running on empty and the taker feels perpetually owed. The person with the entitlement will always believe they are the prize regardless of their actions, leaving the other partner to question their own worth in the face of constant demands and zero gratitude. The ninth behavior no man should tolerate: boundary testing. This isn't about catastrophic betrayals. It's about the small lies, the late-night texts to friends you don't know, the subtle disappearances, the photos she swore she wouldn't post, but did anyway. These aren't grand acts of disloyalty. They're the slow, insidious drip of it. This is the woman who knows your limits, your stated boundaries, and steps just past them to see if you'll flinch. She's probing, testing the elasticity of your self-respect. Marcus Aurelius advised, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But if she does it, if she crosses those lines and you stay, what does that say about you? Every test you fail to address, every boundary you let slide, becomes a game she'll play again and again and again, until your standard becomes fiction and your silence becomes permission for further disrespect. You're teaching her precisely how far she can push before you break, and by then, it's often too late. I've had to learn this the hard way in my own life. I remember a specific instance where a minor boundary I'd set was subtly, almost innocently crossed. It was something small, easily dismissed as no big deal. But then it happened again and again, each time slightly pushing the envelope. The pressure to let it go to avoid conflict was immense. I told myself I was being understanding, flexible. But deep down, I felt a growing resentment, a sense of being disrespected. It was like watching a crack form in a glass knowing that eventually it would shatter. That feeling, that internal pressure to choose between conflict and self-respect, was agonizing. It wasn't until I finally stood firm, risking the conflict, that the testing stopped. It was a clear, undeniable lesson that boundaries are only as strong as your willingness to enforce them, and that every unaddressed test is an invitation for more. And now the 10th and perhaps most insidious behavior no man should tolerate, the erosion of respect. This doesn't manifest through loud fights or dramatic scenes. It's far more subtle, the quiet absence of admiration. She no longer truly listens when you speak. Her eyes don't meet yours with interest when you enter a room. You become background noise in the very home you built. She's not cruel, she's simply indifferent. And this, my friends, is the most violent betrayal of all. Because a man can survive hate. He can fight against animosity. But he cannot survive being ignored. When your presence is met with consistent indifference, when your voice fades into the hum of daily life, something vital within you begins to wither. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. But what of the man who wakes beside a woman who sees no privilege in his presence, no spark in his dreams, no value in his words? He stops rising. He starts fading slowly, imperceptibly, becoming a ghost in his own life. His vitality seeps away, leaving him a hollowed-out version of the man he once was. I once observed a man once vibrant and full of laughter slowly lose his light. His partner never screamed, never directly insulted him, but she rarely truly saw him. When he spoke, her gaze would drift. When he shared a success, she'd offer a perfunctory nod before changing the subject. He became like a piece of furniture in his own home. You could see the slow, quiet despair in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped, the lack of enthusiasm in his voice. He wasn't being actively hurt, but he was being actively disregarded. And that passive disrespect, that quiet erosion of his worth, was far more devastating than any open conflict. It stripped him of his visibility, his sense of mattering, and ultimately his joy. These are the Had 10 behaviors, not opinions, not complaints, realities. Each one a doorway to the death of a man's purpose, one silent surrender at a time. And most men will ignore them. They will dismiss them, because the truth offends where lies seduce. But some, the rare ones, they will listen. They will see that love without respect is slavery with a smile. And they will remember what Marcus Aurelius truly stood for: the discipline of mind, the rule of self, and the sacredness of peace. The illusions are now shattered. The comfortable lies have been exposed. What remains is the man raw wounded and one choice away from either becoming a tyrant over himself or a prisoner to others. Marcus Aurelius called this the battlefield of the soul. This is the painful reality that, if embraced, can become the catalyst for true transformation. Now that the 10 poisons have been named, the question is not whether a man has seen them. The question is whether he's tolerated them, because that is where the real tragedy begins. Not in her behavior, but in his silence. The destruction of a man never starts with her. It starts with what he permits, in the name of love. And every time he forgives what should have been walked away from, every time he explains away betrayal with soft logic, every time he bends his standards to keep her presence, he is not preserving the relationship, he is burying himself alive. There is no glory in being the emotionally bulletproof man who absorbs every wound. That is not strength, that is delusion shaped by desperation. Real strength is in refusal, in walking away without explanation, in choosing your sanity over her apology, in saying, I do not need to burn just because she's cold. But that kind of strength can only come from stillness. From a man who sits with himself long enough to remember that he was whole before she arrived, and he will be whole long after she's gone. There's more, because once a man sees the truth, he must rebuild. And most don't know how. The world offers no blueprint for reconstructing a man after he's been drained by endless tolerance and quiet self-abandonment. But Marcus Aurelius left one for us. The rebuilding begins in a silence. Not the silence of weakness, but the silence of awakening. It's the silence of a man who stops chasing, stops explaining, stops trying to fix what was designed to break him. He stops negotiating with chaos. He stops apologizing for his boundaries. He stops bleeding for those who drink his pain like wine. This silence isn't retreat. It is resurrection. Because for the first time, he is no longer reacting to her moods, her games, her rewrites of reality. He is watching, measuring, choosing, and from this stillness power returns. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by betrayal, by politics, by death, and yet he wrote, Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water. That is the new man, not louder, not crueler, but unshakable. He no longer moves to win her favor. He moves only in alignment with principle. He doesn't shout. He doesn't explain. He doesn't threaten. He acts. And when he acts, everything changes. The woman who once used silence to punish now finds his silence terrifying. The man who once folded to her tears now looks through them. The man who once apologized for wanting peace now demands it, not with words, but with the quiet finality of leaving a room and never returning. This is the man she never thought he'd become, not because he is cruel, but because he is awake. And she can no longer seduce a man who is conscious. This man has returned to the path Marcus Aurelius walked, the path of internal command. His mornings begin with discipline. His speech is slow, deliberate. His time is spent with purpose. He reads more than he scrolls. He builds more than he complains. He retreats into solitude, not to sulk, but to sharpen his mind and spirit. The world may call it cold, but the world does not understand kingship, and with time the scars fade, the temptations dim. He no longer feels the urge to re-explain the past. He no longer fantasizes about her return because he has seen the cost. He has touched the bottom. And once a man has rebuilt himself from ruin, he does not trade that empire to sit in another woman's audience. Marcus Aurelius asked one question every man must write on his mirror at dawn. When you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. That is the work. Not chasing, not pleasing, not arguing, but building and protecting and returning to the sacred fire of just self-mastery, that no woman, no matter how beautiful, is worth extinguishing. This is where the wounds become weapons, where clarity becomes law, and where the man either returns to the throne or stays forever lost in the fog. Let us end as Marcus Aurelius would have, with fire, truth, and command. A man who remembers who he is becomes untouchable. Not because he dominates others, but because he no longer submits to lies. He has walked through the illusion that love must hurt, that tolerance is strength, that being a good man means accepting every storm she brings. No more. The good man is not the weak man. He is the man who sees clearly and still chooses discipline over desire, distance over dysfunction, peace over performance. And now he is dangerous. Not to women, not to the world, but to the empire of manipulation that once fed on his confusion. Because clarity ruins the game. He no longer argues, he observes. He no longer chases, he chooses. He no longer tolerates what drains him, even if it comes dressed in beauty memory or need. Marcus Aurelius didn't sit on the throne of Rome begging for approval. He ruled. The happiness of your life. He said, depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And so the man now guards his thoughts like a warrior. He lets no woman live rent-free in his mind. No memory control his future. No pain distort his mission. He understands this now. Not all love is good. Some women are architects of chaos, not by accident, but by design. And to entertain their behavior, to excuse it, to forgive it endlessly is not mercy. It is masochism. The world may call him cold, bitter, closed off, but the world doesn't have to bleed every night in silence. He does or did, not anymore. Now, he lives by the code of the Stoic, not numb, but sovereign, not hateful, but alert, not reactive, but awake. And should a woman enter his life again, she will feel the weight of his presence. She will sense the boundaries not as walls, but as monuments to a man who refused to break. She will know this is not a man you play with. This is a man you honor or leave because he honors himself. That is the law now. That is the gospel. That is the kingdom rebuilt. And to every man listening, understand this: you were not born to suffer in silence. You were not born to explain yourself into exhaustion. You were not born to tolerate what dishonors your soul. You were born to command yourself, to protect your mind, to guard your fire. And when you do, the world changes. Not because it becomes easier, but because you become immovable. So remember Marcus Aurelius, not as a name, but as a mirror, because the emperor still speaks to every man ready to rise. If this message woke something in you, if it resonated with a part of you that's been dormant, then don't let it end here. Like this video. Share it with a brother who's still trapped in the illusion. Subscribe. If you want more content that cuts deeper than comfort, that confronts instead of flatters. And if you believe in this work, if you want more philosophy, more truth, more unfiltered guidance for men, then consider donating to support it. The link is in the description. This isn't entertainment, this is a calling, and you are part of it now.